I was taken by Alexa Gilmore a few days ago with Mary Jo Letty, living legend, very important detail, Mary Jo Letty, to 3 of the refugee centers in this area: the Uganda Muslim Association of Canada at Weston, Pilgrim's Feast Tabernacle Rexdale, and Dominion Church International at Jane and Finch. So 2 large basements and an old stripped-down mall. Since March, up to 400 people a day have been sleeping and eating in these places, being advised on what to do with their lives. They've lived at first on mattresses on the floor, and now many of them on basic beds. Very clean places, no windows, but these are volunteer religious organizations which have taken responsibility since March and done everything they possibly can without government support. And the result is that, I think I'm allowed to say it, but many of them have spent so much money that they're now in difficulty as a result of the incredible investment they've made in the public interest, which is a government responsibility. But they have taken that responsibility for all of us. And they've done it out of a true concern for the other, the less fortunate, the refugee. They've made a remarkable ethical commitment on behalf of the entire community of Toronto. The obvious central point to all of this is the situation is wrong. It's deeply wrong. We've got a government, civil service, very high quality. The civil service gives visas in Africa to a large number of people to come to Canada, and that's good. That's great. That's what the history of this country. That's what we should be doing. It costs these people who get the visas an enormous amount of money to prepare for the visas and to travel to Canada. The result is that they, in general, arrive with no money left. They arrive poverty-stricken by the process of getting here. And remember, giving a visa is giving an invitation to come to Canada. It's not some cold thing. When a democracy like Canada issues a visa, we're saying, come. We want you to come to this country. And so it is an invitation. They arrive, and this is no secret, everyone here knows it. They arrive, there are basically no government services for them, and this simply is not normal. It is not good. It is not what they used to call the Canadian way. If the Canadian way means something, this is not the Canadian way. One point I really want to make that's very important about immigration and refugees immigrating to Canada is that the tradition has always been, unlike almost every other Western democracy, is the moment you step on Canadian soil, your road to citizenship begins. Most of our allies, that's not what happens. You arrive and then they spend years and years trying to prevent you becoming a citizen. Our idea is the sooner you become a citizen, the better, because once you're a citizen, you can contribute along with everybody else in every possible way. Some of it you can do without being a citizen, but some of it you need to be a citizen to make that kind of contribution. As I say, most of our allies don't agree with this approach. It's one of the peculiarities of this country. It's a very special approach, which we should be very proud of, provided we keep it up and are true to ourselves. Here, a refugee is a citizen in the making. Just remember that. When these people come, who we're putting in basements, they are citizens in the making. And secondly, yes, it's wonderful to come here, but remember, they always bring with them enormous experiences. No matter, and even the more problematic their backgrounds, their countries, that's an enormous experience of what to avoid. They bring knowledge, experience, and the knowledge of what dangers could come upon societies. So this has almost always been our system, our particularity. And look, there are lots of systems in place in Canada and programs in place in Canada to support Ukrainian refugees. Fantastic. I'm totally in favor, as I'm sure all of us are. Syrian refugees, fantastic. This is good. Afghan refugees, fantastic, although I would say not nearly enough places have been made for the Afghan refugees, considering our very deep relationship with the Afghans. There are welcome centers for all of these people at Pearson Terminal, in Terminals 1 and 3. There are dedicated resources. And yet for African refugees, these services don't exist. It's incredible. They simply do not exist. And yet they arrive every day. They continue to arrive every day with visas, with invitations from us to come to Canada. And yet these services don't exist. So here's the thing. Canada is a home. Think of it as a home. It is a home. You invite somebody to your home. You invite them to your table. You welcome them. You make them comfortable. You feed them. You ask them if there's anything you can do to help, to make their life here better, to help them get going. And they join us at our national table. We eat, metaphorically and hopefully as often as possible in reality, we eat together. We learn to live together in many, many different ways. So you don't abandon your guests the moment they arrive. You don't abandon them to sleep in the basement where they live in the desperate hope that someone will feed them out of the goodness of their ethical and religious beliefs. To not treat these African refugees as citizens in the making is a betrayal of the most basic responsibilities of the host, which Canada has always seen itself as. Immigration has always been one of the most important strategic federal national responsibilities. There's no question about that. It's a federal national responsibility. We built the country on the idea that the federal government would lead in immigration. And these African refugees are part of that 150-year-old policy. And we built the country this way. My family came that way. First in the 18th century, through the 19th century. My mother came out of the Second World War. There are people in my family who come in different ways, some as refugees. I've worked with different kinds of refugees over the years. But again, the federal responsibility doesn't end when the refugees arrive at the airport. For over 4 centuries, under different regimes, we have had government systems which have helped immigrants and refugees get settled. That support is needed today for the Ugandan and other African refugees who are in their turn coming here to do as we did, to help to build a better Canada. Thank you very much.